Hey, how you doing?
Doing very well this morning. So, I mean, this is interesting because the Fast and the Furious program, this gun sales program being actuated, on the Mexican-U.S. border. Can you just give us a little bit of background on this?
Sure. Well, it's been complicated because people were referring to Operation Fast and Furious, and they refer to gun running as well, or gun runner. Gun runner is an older border initiative. It had to do with drugs, had to do with guns, and it actually stretched back to the Bush administration. Fast and Furious is sort of an offshoot of that, and now we realize it's the one that's causing all these problems for ATF and federal authorities involved. Fast and Furious started in October 2009,
right.
And essentially what it sought to do was to run a sort of a sting operation that would let guns get illegally sold to straw buyers, and this was based out of the Phoenix, Arizona ATF office. And once those guns were sold to those straw buyers, knowingly, of course, the authorities would allow them to then go south of the border and find their way into the hands of the Mexican drug cartels. This was basically a way to try to get at least in theory, high-level members of the Sinaloa drug cartel.
Okay, so they were trying to, they did these fake buys, or the fake sales of these guns. They took the guns back across the border, but now we're finding out that there are now at least 3 Fast and Furious-related guns found at the murder scene of a U.S. Border Patrol agent, Brian Terry, and now the Mexican government has also estimated that 200 of its citizens have been killed by weapons tied to this program. This is pretty bad.
The Mexican Attorney General is obviously furious about this. The claim has been that the Attorney General's office in Mexico found out about this in the press, which is interesting because Eric Holder, going back to, I believe it was May of this year, claimed that he also heard about it in the press. So that one is obviously receiving more scrutiny because there were a lot of reasonably senior ATF managerial contacts going on, and that's really the question right now: is where does the trail end here? Who okayed this kind of an operation? And because of the cross-border nexus, you have to assume that people at a senior level would want the top cover. And the more information comes out on this, the more it seems like it wasn't some sort of a rogue operation coming out of just ATF, because there was coordination with other federal agencies involved. So.
Well, yeah, and then yesterday's revelations, and the reason we're talking about this today is the fact that federal agents themselves, it appears, and this is according to the latest documents on this, acted as middlemen between the straw buyers, who we just mentioned, and the drug cartel themselves.
Right. This was... Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is sort of a bombshell among bombshells. It appears right now, at least, that there may have been one instance where somebody from ATF bought and then sold directly to a cartel member. So the straw buyers now have been completely removed from that equation, and then allowed in this case, the buyer for the cartel to lose surveillance, essentially. And there are some questions as to why that would be done. Just as a general background on this, law enforcement does not let guns walk. ATF agents have testified before Congress. That is just a violation of a very tightly held principle for law enforcement, because if they let a gun walk and something happens, in this case we know that in the Brian Terry murder...
Border Patrol agent shot dead, yeah.
Yeah, if they let a gun walk, well, then the government can be held liable, essentially.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really amazing that kind of an operation would go down. And the accusation, and this was from Fox News, who got it from a blogger, by the way. I must say this story has been pushed by the blogger community, much more than any sort of the mainstream media outlets, and a lot of them aren't even really touching it, even still, which is amazing.
I'm shocked. How does that not get it? I mean, we have all these other, investigative Brian Ross going after these other guys, and right now we're not seeing anything being done on this. This is a serious thing. This was selling guns from the government that ended in the death of a Border Patrol agent.
There are so many possible violations of law here, and maybe even violations of treaty with Mexico, that it's hard to even keep it straight. The fact that some of the larger media outlets, mainstream media outlets, aren't covering this is astounding, except you recognize that it's just so clearly political. If this were to get to the level of senior Department of Justice officials, and you have some resignations. It's an election year. Obviously, the administration's already in trouble. I think they're just hoping they can sort of slow roll this process, and they are keeping open. And this is very interesting, and this has come out over the past couple of months, that they're keeping open essentially investigations that earlier would have been closed. They are people that would have pleaded out on gun charges involved in this sort of gun runner border operation. They're not allowing them to plea out because they want to keep the case going, because that actually changes the ability of Congress to get certain information.
Oh, it's fascinating. Unbelievable. Well, Buck Sexton, thank you so much for the background on this bizarre and disturbing case. You can keep up with Buck and all the stories of the day at theblaze.com. Thanks so much again.
Thanks again for having me.